Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into something really core to thinking clearly, especially about those big ethical questions we all grapple with. We're talking about moral reasoning.
Exactly. It underpins so much.
And we've got a great guide for this, A Concise Introduction to Ethics by Russ, Shafer, Landeu. Think of it as, well, a toolkit for understanding how arguments work, spotting good ones, and importantly, avoiding common thinking traps.
It's a really solid resource for this.
Yeah. Our mission today, really, is to give you the tools to not just follow moral debates, but to actually evaluate arguments you hear every single day, from the news, online, wherever.
To cut through the noise, spot the dodgy logic.
Right. And just become, better informed. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So first off, when we say argument, we don't mean yelling at each other, right?
No, not at all. In this context, an argument is more like a chain of thought. You've got reasons, philosophers call them premises.
Premises, right.
And they're offered up to support a specific point, the conclusion.
Like building a case. And you can often spot the conclusion with words like therefore, or so, or hence.
Precisely. And when we're thinking morally, we've got sort of two related aims. First, obviously, we want to land on the right conclusion. The truth, if you like.
Yeah, makes sense.
But second, and this is key, we need to back that up with really solid, flawless reasoning. It's actually possible to get the right answer, but for all the wrong reasons.
Oh, interesting. Like stumbling into the truth.
Exactly. And that's just as much a mistake, logically speaking, as ending up with a completely wrong conclusion. It means your belief, even if correct, isn't properly supported. So we need both things. Avoid believing false things and make sure our path to our beliefs is logically sound. And look, there's no magic test for truth for any belief, moral or otherwise.
Right.
Which is why really digging into the evidence and the strength of the arguments is just, well, essential.
Okay, so here's a twist. An argument can actually be bad, even if all its premises, all the reasons it gives, are factually true.
Yeah, this trips people up a lot. It often comes down to the structure, the logic, connecting the premises to the conclusion.
Let's use an example. How about 1, heroin is a drug. 2, selling heroin is illegal. Both true statements. Therefore, 3, heroin use is immoral.
Okay, so premises 1 and 2 are definitely true. But ask yourself, do they guarantee that conclusion? Do they force you to accept it?
No, I don't think so. You could agree with 1 and 2, but still think, well, maybe using it isn't always immoral depending on the situation or something.
Exactly. You could accept the premises and reject the conclusion without contradicting yourself. That argument is invalid. Its logic is flawed. Logical validity means something very specific. If the premises were true, the conclusion must also be true. It's about that inescapable link.
So validity isn't about whether the premises are true in the real world.
Not directly, no. It's a hypothetical test.
Right.
We test it with a kind of thought experiment. Step 1, identify all the premises.
Okay.
Step 2, imagine they're all true. Just pretend, even if you know one is false.
Right. Suspend disbelief for a moment.
Step 3, ask, assuming all those premises are true, could the conclusion still be false? If the answer is yes, it's invalid. The premises don't lock down the conclusion.
But if the answer is no, if the true premises would make the conclusion unavoidable,
then it's valid. The structure is logically perfect.
Okay, let's try that. Here's a classic logic puzzle type.
Yeah.
1, John Quincy Adams was either the 8th or 9th U.S. president. 2, John Quincy Adams was not the 8th U.S. president.
Okay.
Therefore, 3, John Quincy Adams was the 9th U.S. president. Now, if we imagine premises 1 and 2 are true,
then the conclusion has to be true. If he's one of two options and he's not the first, he must be the second. That argument is perfectly valid. The logic is flawless.
it's still a terrible argument, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah.
because premise 1 is just plain false. He was the 6th president, not the 8th or 9th.
Oh, right.
So this shows it perfectly. Validity is only about the logical structure, the connection. It says nothing about whether the starting points, the premises, are actually true.
Got it. So validity is necessary, but not sufficient for a good argument. What are we actually aiming for then? What's the gold standard?
What we're really after, especially in philosophy and ethics, are sound arguments. Soundness is the target.
Okay, what makes an argument sound?
2 things, and it needs both. First, it has to be logically valid. The structure must be perfect.
A check, like the Adams example structure.
Right. And second, all of its premises must actually be true in the real world.
Ah, okay, so valid structure plus true starting points.
Exactly. If you have both validity and true premises, then the conclusion is guaranteed. It must be true. That's rock-solid reasoning.
And that means we should avoid saying an argument is true or false, right? That's a common slip-up.
Absolutely. Premises can be true or false. Conclusions can be true or false. Arguments themselves, they're valid or invalid, sound or unsound. Getting that terminology right really helps clarify your thinking.
Okay, terminology noted. Now, to dig a bit deeper into how arguments work, we need to get clear on two really important ideas: sufficient conditions and necessary conditions.
Yes, these concepts are fundamental. People mix them up all the time, but they're crucial. Let's start with sufficient condition. Think of it as a guarantee.
A guarantee.
Yeah. If X is a sufficient condition for Y, it means X is enough to make Y happen. If got X, you've automatically got Y.
Okay, like being born human is sufficient for being a mammal.
Perfect example. If you're human, you are definitely 100% a mammal. Being human guarantees it. But notice, it's not the only way to be a mammal. Dogs are mammals too.
Right, so it's enough but not required. What about necessary conditions then?
A necessary condition is a requirement, a prerequisite. If X is a necessary condition for Y, then Y can happen only if X also happens. You can't have Y without X.
Like oxygen is necessary for human life.
Exactly. You cannot live without oxygen. It's an absolute requirement. But just having oxygen around isn't sufficient to guarantee you're alive.
Right.
You need other things too.
Gotcha. So sufficient is enough, necessary is required.
Precisely. And these conditions are always conditions of or for something. You don't just say it's a guarantee. You ask a guarantee of what?
Why is this so vital for ethics?
Because often in moral philosophy, we're searching for what's called a biconditional. That sounds technical, but it just means we're looking for conditions that are both necessary and sufficient for something.
Both.
Yeah, like we want to fill in the blank and act is morally right, if and only if. And then find something that fits perfectly. That if and only if means the condition you find is both required, necessary, and enough on its own, sufficient.
And finding that is like the holy grail.
Pretty much. If you can define moral rightness, say, with conditions that are genuinely necessary and sufficient applying everywhere, that's a huge achievement.
I see why we need both now. The source material had a good point here. If someone says an act is wrong only if it causes pain, they're making pain a necessary condition for wrongness.
Right. It has to cause pain to be wrong, according to them.
But then, if they tell you Tina caused Tommy pain, you still don't know if her act was wrong. Maybe she's a dentist fixing his tooth. Causing pain was necessary, but not sufficient on its own.
Exactly. Just having the necessary bit isn't enough.
And the other way around. If someone says betraying a vulnerable child just for fun is sufficient for your action to be wrong.
Well, that's clearly true. That action is enough to be wrong. It guarantees wrongness.
Yeah, definitely. But that statement, while true, doesn't give you a broad test for wrongness in general. It only covers that one specific horrible type of action. It's sufficient, but it's not necessary for an act to be wrong. There are lots of wrong acts that don't involve betraying kids.
Precisely. We often seek those broader principles, the conditions that are both necessary and sufficient to cover all cases, or at least as many as possible. That's the challenge.
Okay, that clarifies necessary and sufficient conditions. Now, you mentioned valid arguments earlier. Are there specific patterns or forms of argument that are always logically valid, like templates we can trust?
Yes, absolutely. There are several classic forms. Let's look at 3 really common and powerful ones. Don't worry about the abstract P's and Q's. They just stand for any statement.
Okay, lay them on us.
The first, and maybe the most basic, is modus ponens. The structure is 1, if P, then Q 2. P is true, therefore 3, Q must be true.
If P, then QP happens, so Q happens.
Exactly. Remember, sufficient condition. The if P part, the antecedent, states a sufficient condition for the then Q part, the consequent. If the guarantee is met, the thing it guarantees Q has to follow.
So like if it's raining P, then the street is wet Q. It is raining P, therefore the street is wet Q.
Perfect. That's modus ponens. And if your premises are true, it actually is raining, then it's not just valid, it's sound.
Okay, number 2.
Number 2 is modus tollens. This one goes 1. If P, then Q, 2. Q is false. Therefore, 3, P must be false.
If P, then Q. But Q didn't happen, so P couldn't have happened.
You got it. Remember, necessary condition, the then Q part, the consequent, is a necessary condition for the if P part, the antecedent. Think of if P, then Q as meaning P only if Q. If the necessary requirement Q fails, then the thing that required it, P, must also have failed.
Example.
If the burglar came through the window P, then the window would be broken Q. The window is not broken, Q is false. Therefore, the burglar didn't come through the window, P is false.
Makes sense. If the necessary outcome isn't there, the condition that required it can't have happened. What's the third one?
The third is the hypothetical syllogism. This one links conditional statements together. 1 is P then Q2, if Q then R, therefore 3, if P then R.
Like a chain reaction of guarantees.
Exactly. If P guarantees Q and Q guarantees R, then P must ultimately guarantee R.
If I study hard P, I'll pass the test Q. If I pass the test Q, my parents will be happy R.
Right.
Therefore, if I study hard P, my parents will be happy R.
Perfect. It just transfers the guarantee down the line. These three modus ponens, modus tollens, hypothetical syllogism are incredibly useful, always valid structures.
Okay, so knowing how to build good arguments is key. But just as important is knowing how to spot the bad ones, right? The mistakes in reasoning.
Absolutely. We call these mistakes fallacies. A fallacy is just a defect in an argument that makes it weak or invalid. Some are formal fallacies. The error is literally in the logical structure, like breaking the rules of modus ponens or tollens.
And others.
Others are informal fallacies. These are trickier. The structure might look okay on the surface, but there's a flaw in the content, the relevance of the premises, or how language is used. They often rely on psychological tricks rather than logic.
And we see these everywhere, I assume.
Oh, constantly. Advertising, politics, internet comments, even in everyday chats. Learning to spot them is like developing an immunity to bad arguments. It really cleans up your own thinking, too.
All right, let's look at some common ones. Maybe start with a couple of those formal fallacies, the ones that mess up the structure.
Good idea. One very common one is called denying the antecedent. It looks like this. 1. If P, then Q2, P is false. Therefore, 3, Q is false.
Wait, that sounds a bit like modus tollens, but backwards. If I'm riding a bike P, then I'm alive Q. I'm not riding a bike, P is false. Therefore, I'm dead, Q is false.
That can't be right.
Exactly. It's fallacious. Why? Because P, riding a bike, is only one possible sufficient condition for Q being alive. Just because that one sufficient condition isn't met doesn't mean Q can't be true for other reasons. You can be alive while walking, sleeping, swimming.
Right. It wrongly assumes P is the only way to get Q.
Precisely. Okay, another formal fallacy, affirming the consequent, structure. 1. If P, then Q2. Q is true, therefore 3, P is true.
If P, then Q, Q is true, so P must be true. How about if someone is a billionaire P, then they have more than $10 Q?
True statement.
I have more than $10 Q is true.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm a billionaire P is true. Sadly, no. Haha, exactly. It's fallacious. Why? Because Q, having $10, is a necessary condition for P, being a billionaire, but it's definitely not sufficient. Just because the necessary outcome is present doesn't mean the specific condition, P, that implies it must be the cause. Lots of non-billionaires have $10.
Got it. So those two mimic the valid forms, but get the logic wrong. Now, what about those informal fallacies, the ones that rely on psychology or irrelevant information?
Right. These are sneakier. A big one is the ad hominem fallacy. Ad hominem means to the person.
Attacking the person instead of their argument.
Exactly. You try to discredit a position by attacking the character, motives, or circumstances of the person making the argument, rather than engaging with the actual reasons or evidence they offer.
Like saying you can't trust his economic plan, he failed math in high school.
Classic example. Or, her argument for animal rights is invalid because she wears leather shoes. It's irrelevant to the argument's logical strength or the truth of the conclusion.
Right. Their personal flaws or hypocrisy don't automatically make their argument wrong.
Correct. Bad people can make good arguments, and good people can make bad ones. You have to assess the argument on its own merits. Focus on the reasoning, not the person.
Okay, what else? I feel like appeals to emotion are common.
Definitely. That's the appeal to irrelevant emotions. Trying to persuade someone by provoking feelings like pity, fear, anger, or patriotism, instead of providing relevant evidence or logical reasons.
Marketers use jealousy. Politicians sometimes use fear.
All the time. Now, emotions aren't always irrelevant. Feeling outrage at injustice can point to a moral problem. But when emotions are used instead of or to distract from logical reasoning about the issue itself, that's a fallacy. It manipulates rather than informs.
How about trusting experts? Can that go wrong?
Yes, through the appeal to authority fallacy. This happens when you cite an authority figure, but they aren't actually an expert in the specific subject being discussed.
So trusting your doctor about your health is fine.
Of course, that's relevant expertise. But quoting your favorite actor on, say, nuclear physics policy, that's probably an appeal to irrelevant authority. Their fame doesn't make them a physics expert.
Or even citing, say, a brilliant biologist on a question of pure moral philosophy.
Exactly. Scientific expertise doesn't automatically translate to moral expertise. You always have to ask, is this person an authority in this field? Is this claim within their area of competence?
Okay, another one I hear about is the straw man. What's that?
Ah, the straw man fallacy. This is where you misrepresent your opponent's argument, often making it seem weaker or more extreme than it really is, just so it's easier to attack and knock down.
So you build a flimsy straw man version of their view instead of tackling their actual, potentially stronger real man argument.
Precisely. You distort their position, refute the distorted version, and then claim victory over their actual position. It's dishonest debating, really. It avoids genuine engagement.
Got it. What about arguments based on lack of proof?
That leads us to the appeal to ignorance. This fallacy comes in two main flavors. First, believing something is true simply because it hasn't been proven false. Like, nobody has proven ghosts don't exist, so they must be real.
Right.
Second, believing something is false simply because it hasn't been proven true.
Yeah.
There's no definitive proof that this new supplement works, so it must be useless.
So in both cases, you're treating a lack of evidence as if it is evidence.
Exactly. The absence of proof is not proof of absence, nor is it proof of presence. Ignorance about something doesn't make it true or false. We just don't know.
Okay, one more. What about jumping to conclusions from limited experience?
That's the hasty generalization fallacy, drawing a broad conclusion about a whole group based on a very small or unrepresentative sample.
Like meeting one rude person from City X and concluding everyone from City X is rude.
Classic hasty generalization. You're making a sweeping claim based on, well, incredibly flimsy evidence. Good reasoning requires looking at a much larger, more representative sample before making big general claims. It's about avoiding stereotypes based on limited data.
Phew. Okay, that is quite the tour of reasoning, both good and bad. We've gone from the basic structure of an argument, needing premises and a conclusion.
Right, to the difference between just having a valid structure and having a truly sound argument, which needs both validity and true premises.
And we unpack those crucial ideas of necessary and sufficient conditions, which are key to understanding how claims relate to each other.
And the power of those reliable forms like modus ponens and modus tollens.
And then we dove into that whole rogues gallery of fallacies, attacking the person, distorting their argument, appealing to irrelevant things like emotion or inappropriate authority, jumping to conclusions.
Yeah, a lot of ways reasoning can go off the rails. But what's really powerful, I think, is that once you start recognizing these patterns, both the good and the bad, it genuinely changes how you process information. Well, you start listening differently. You hear a claim on the news or from a friend or online, and you automatically start thinking, okay, what are the premises here? Is the reasoning valid?
Yeah.
Is it sound? Are there any fallacies at play? It becomes a kind of background process.
So it's not just for formal debates or philosophy class. It's a tool for everyday thinking.
Absolutely. It helps you become a more discerning consumer of information, less likely to be swayed by faulty logic or emotional manipulation. It helps you evaluate your own beliefs more critically, too.
Which brings us back to the listener. What does all this mean for you? Well, it means you're now better equipped. You have a framework, a set of tools to analyze arguments more effectively, to feel more confident in your own reasoning, and to spot those logical gaps or tricks when others use them.
It really is a practical skill for navigating this incredibly complex world we live in, filled with competing claims and arguments.
Definitely. So, to leave you with something to chew on.
Yeah, a final thought.
How about this? Think about the moral concepts that really matter to you. Things like fairness, or justice, or kindness, or courage. Try applying what we've talked about. Can you articulate the conditions that are truly necessary and sufficient for an action to count as fair in your eyes, or for a situation to be considered just?
That's a tough exercise, trying to pin down those if and only if definitions for core moral values.
It is tough. But really trying to clarify those conditions for yourself, what's absolutely required, what's truly enough, is a profound way to sharpen your own moral understanding and maybe even refine your own compass.
A challenging but potentially very rewarding homework assignment, then.
Exactly. Something to mull over.